Hello and welcome to Inside Judicial Watch. I'm your host, Bruce Schlussman. With me today we have a very special guest, one of our senior investigators here at Judicial Watch, Bill Marshall. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me back, Bruce. Good to be back.
Of course. So we're here to talk about the recent press release that we put out and the revelations related to Strzok Page and the FBI investigation into Clinton and kind of the disparity of that investigation to the investigation of President Trump eventually. Would you speak a little bit to that?
Right. Well, we know that Hillary was treated incredibly deferentially, to put it, as probably the understatement of the year, maybe. But yeah, what this recent production records that we've released demonstrates is that the Hillary's attorney, David Kendall, was able to talk to the top lawyer at the FBI. This is the general counsel, James Baker, at 10 o'clock at night. Okay, James Baker is willing to take Hillary's lawyer's call at 10 o'clock at night. Now, I challenge you or anyone else or me, a regular person, to try to get a hold of the FBI's general counsel at 10 o'clock at night to discuss your case or your client's case. It's pretty much unheard of. And yeah, that was Kendall called Baker on August 16th, 2016, demanding that the FBI release to him, to David Kendall, Hillary's what they call an FBI 302. This is a written summary of the interview that the FBI conducted of Hillary. You'll recall that approximately a month and a half earlier, the FBI had finally interviewed Hillary as part of its investigation into Hillary's abuse of national security records through her illegal use of a personal email server that was unsecured to traffic highly sensitive government records. And of course, then she deleted supposedly her people deleted 30,000 of her emails, and all kinds of spoliation of evidence, I'd argue, occurred. But in any event, so about a month and a half after James Comey exonerated Hillary famously on July 5th, 2016, we have David Kendall calling James Baker at the FBI, the top lawyer, demanding this 302. Then James Baker says to him, "Oh yes, certainly. All you need to do is submit a FOIA request, and we will handle it expeditiously, getting this to you." Now, we do FOIA all day long, and I can guarantee you we can't get a hold of the top lawyer at the FBI and demand that documents be turned over to us expeditiously and then have the top lawyer agree to do that. I mean, everything with us is a fight. All getting records out of the government is a battle, generally involves litigation. We have to file a lawsuit against the government to get those records. Then, immediately after the call at 10 o'clock at night, James Baker emails all the top brass of the FBI, or most of the top brass, saying, "I've just had this conversation with Hillary's lawyer. He wants her 302 form furnished, expeditiously." And he says to them in his email, "We must get the 302 out the door as soon as possible." Okay, again, this is this kid glove treatment, this royal treatment that Hillary gets, at the hands of the FBI. And interestingly, Baker also tells his people that he assured David Kendall, Hillary's lawyer, that they would give David Kendall a heads up, an alert, and before they posted Hillary's 302 on their website, the FBI website, which is called the Vault. So again, this all just illustrates sort of this two-tier system of justice, or at least at the FBI, with how they treat the people in this elevated class, Democrat class, this Hillary Clinton and her cronies. So this is a just sort of one more thing that turns up in this kid glove treatment that we've seen of Hillary all along, in that case.
To that point, do you believe the FBI's lack of due diligence to document at least 4 email probe witnesses, do you believe that's part of this, and do you think that was negligence, or do you think that was malice?
Well, you're referring to the 302, right, they're at least a page about a month after James Comey's exoneration of Hillary, says to her colleagues, oh, we're still missing 4 302 forms that were never written, okay? Mm-hmm. Now that's very interesting because she was saying that, yes, there were 4 witnesses that were interviewed that whose interviews were never transcribed by the FBI into these formal documents, these 302s. And you have to ask yourself, well, why is that? Now, as I understand it, the FBI, I mean, 302s are essentially testimonial documents, right? I mean, the FBI agent who writes down the summary of the interview has to be willing to go to court and attest to the accuracy of his notes, right? Mm-hmm. And from my understanding of FBI procedures, in criminal cases, these 302s are normally written, and I believe fairly expeditiously. You fill them. You don't want your memory's going to fade as time goes by. For some reason that I've never quite understood, the FBI doesn't electronically record its interviews. They rely on the notes of the agents and the recollections of the agents to then transcribe the summary of the interview into these 302s. In this day and age, I'm a bit baffled as to why they don't use audio and video recordings of agent interviews. I suspect it's, I'm a bit cynical. I think it's more of a self-protective mechanism or measure on the part of the FBI, but who knows? Maybe they have a rationale behind that practice. But yes, it struck me as odd that in one of the most important investigations the FBI has ever done, the egregious abuse by Hillary Clinton of trafficking classified information on her own personal server, that they would not have immediately documented in these 302 forms these 4 interviews that were taken by the FBI.
I want to back up to you mentioning the Clintons' requests being processed much quicker. Mm-hmm. Do you want to speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, well, I think that again, we've seen the FBI in so many aspects of this, what they referred to the Hillary Clinton email server investigation internally as mid-year exam. That was sort of the code name, if you will, for this investigation. And as we've seen through all the records that have been divulged in that case and how that case was handled, where you had fact witnesses like Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson, being able to attend Hillary's interview with the FBI. This flies in the face of basic law enforcement practice. You don't allow witnesses that could be interviewed in a case to sit in on other witnesses' interviews. Then you had immunity agreements handed out like candy to the various players, including I believe Heather Samuelson got one, and various witnesses who were central to setting up the server and using this server illegally, being granted immunity for no apparent benefit being derived by the government in exchange for those immunity agreements. So there are just so many aspects of this case that sort of beg many questions about the legitimacy of the FBI's investigation, which I think everyone who has looked at the evidence and looked at the facts surrounding this case would reasonably conclude that it was an investigation that was ill-starred. It was tanked from the beginning, and there was never any expectation that Hillary would face justice for her violations of federal law when it came to classified information and violations of the Espionage Act.
And one of those kind of red flags in this investigation appeared to be Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, correct?
Right. I mean, they are sort of the Rosetta Stone of this whole saga. Peter Strzok was incredibly central to both the Hillary email server investigation and to the so-called Russia-Trump collusion counterintelligence investigation, operation investigation. He was even hired then initially by Robert Mueller to serve on his investigative team until, of course, the text messages were exposed and then Strzok was removed from the team. But Peter Strzok and Lisa Page famously, recall from the text messages they exchanged, came up with the insurance policy that was, in Peter Strzok's words, was thrown out in Andy McCabe's office. In other words, should Trump win this election in 2016, we're going to have an insurance policy to take action that will prevent his being able to operate, to function as a president, potentially undermine his presidency, what have you. I don't want to read too much into what she was saying from that cryptic conversation, but it was clear that they had a plan in place to subvert Donald Trump.
So before you mentioned kind of Kendall's role and how closely he was working with the FBI, and the FBI FOIA chief gave Clinton's lawyer Kendall a heads up. Do you want to speak a little bit about what that meant?
Right. Well, typically, the FBI oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes they'll post records that have been requested by FOIA requesters like us and others. Yeah. They'll post those records on their website, their public website called the Vault. And many people were requesting Hillary's 302 form. This is a summary of her interview with the FBI. I think it happened, I want to say it was like July 3rd of 2016. I could be off on the date, but it was around then. James Baker, the general counsel of the FBI, in his conversation with David Kendall, assures David Kendall that he would alert him to the release of Hillary's 302 on the Vault website, before it was actually made public. And I can guarantee you that we never get an alert when the FBI plans to post records on its website. In fact, we resent the fact that the FBI often posts records to its website that we have fought for. As an organization, we've gone to great expense and time to take the FBI to court in order to get records out, which it undercuts the journalistic enterprise when the FBI takes records that we have fought for and then posts them on their website. I mean, I understand it's good for government transparency, but at the same time, you have people who've gone to a lot of great lengths and effort, like we do in court and otherwise, to get records that should, for at least a period of time, should be unique to us. That is, they should be restricted, I believe, to the individual requester for maybe a couple of weeks or some period of time before the FBI posts them for the public to see, because that's the essence of journalism. It's trying to get the information out there first and conduct the analysis of those records, a proper analysis.
So moving on to the incident with the Daily Beast reporter and his conversation with James Comey, would you speak a little bit about what happened in that conversation and what it means?
Right. Well, what happened was a Daily Beast reporter had contacted the FBI. He didn't contact. I don't think he contacted James Comey, but it was somebody within probably the Public Affairs Office of the FBI, asking about James Comey's testimony before Congress, in which Comey had testified that Hillary's lawyers at Williams and Connolly, I believe it was, did not have the security clearances necessary to be holding on to the highly classified information that had been turned over to them by Hillary's people for safekeeping. While the back and forth was occurring between the FBI and Hillary, and about the location of these emails that Hillary had, Hillary's people had culled out, and tens of thousands of them. So some of these emails contained highly classified information. Her lawyers at Williams and Connolly did not have the security clearances necessary to possess those or even read those documents. And I do not believe that Williams and Connolly had facilities, we might call them a SCIF, or specially compartmented, sensitive compartmented intelligence information facilities to house highly classified documents. So there's a whole series of questions that were raised when James Comey said in his testimony that no, Hillary's lawyers didn't have the security clearances necessary. So when this Daily Beast reporter contacts the FBI and he says, "I just want to confirm that James Comey was accurate there, that Hillary's lawyers didn't have these high security clearances," this sets off a scramble among communications among the various top FBI officials over a span of 28 hours, which eventually reaches Comey himself. And what's interesting is most of it's redacted, so we don't know what they were saying, but it generated a lot of excitement at the FBI, the fact that the Daily Beast was pursuing this line of questioning.
Seems a little shady, too, that it was redacted as well.
Well, it does. I mean, and now they're going to claim it was deliberative process. The FBI lawyers could properly withhold those communications because they were deliberative in nature, and there is a proper exemption within the FOIA law to shield deliberative documents. But one of the things I found interesting was the last exchange on that, which was when Lisa Page concludes this email exchange by saying, "Could we say something more equivocal?" We don't know what she was responding to, but that just to me is such a Washington phrase or thought. Can we say something more equivocal in response to this Daily Beast reporter? So and typical lawyerly, kind of a response. But equivocation is what the FBI was certainly all about, I think, in the case of the Hillary's violations of federal law.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us and walking us through all of this going on. So my last question before we head out is, where does Judicial Watch go from here?
Well, we continue to get records from the Strzok-Page relationship. I mean, every month. This is not the most recent production. We have more productions that we're going to be reporting on soon, and we'll be analyzing with even more really dynamic and dynamite information. Revelations, thanks to Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, truly remarkable figures in American history, and I don't think in a good way. I think I think they have. It will be interesting to see what legal implications they face under Attorney General Barr, and one can only hope that they are held to account, just as you or I would be if we were engaged in those kinds of activities.
Absolutely, and something to think about. Thank you for joining us.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Inside Judicial Watch. Please be sure to check out other episodes. Go to our website. Donate if you support our work here. Please like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and of course, subscribe to us on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us.